Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will continue with the meeting. Thank you. Item 6, S21-1201, and we have Phil Jordan, Principal Planning Officer, doing the representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good afternoon, members. This next application is reference S21-1201. It's something we don't see very often at Planning Committee. It's what we call a discharge of conditions application. So we spent quite a long time on the last item talking about a condition that could be applied to any permission, and members will recall that we debated the reserve matters application for 373 houses at Elsie Park back in March, and various conditions were applied to that planning permission. This application is a submission of details pursuant to condition 2 on that on that permission, and condition 5 in specifically part 8 of that condition. So the applicant's been required to submit details of a historic building recording survey relating to Bridge 234 and details of the pocket park and associated landscaping for that part of the site as well. I've already been introduced. I'm Phil Jordan, Principal Planning Officer, and the application is within the Elsie Park Zone 7. So the condition 2, I'll put it up on the screen. Effectively, the condition required that prior to any demolition of Bridge 234, a level 4 historic building recording survey should be undertaken, submitted and approved by the planning authority. Second part of the condition, it's typical of those surveys in that once approved, they're then required to be submitted and held on the historic environment record. And condition 5, and in specific, or in particular part 8 of that condition, again, said notwithstanding the submitted details before any development, including demolition in each phase, is commenced, details of the soft and hard landscaping and for the dwellings on the public areas shall be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. And it was the part 8 that specifically required details of the play areas and specified the naming equipment and any interpretation boards for that proposed pocket park. So just to familiarise members, Elsie Park is that large urban extension to the south of Bourne. This is the latest version of the master plan that's been approved. There is a condition on the outline permission that requires the development to be carried out in accordance with the approved master plan. And you can see that over time, a number of phases have been built out. These are the ones where you've got the detailed layouts, and the later phases of Elsie Park, which are shown in brown, have either been recently consented and under construction, or recently consented, looking to discharge the conditions and start construction. Zone 7 and the other half of Zone 6 is actually this other half of Zone 6 that we're talking about. Within that part of the site, there was this former railway bridge, Bridge 234, and I'll come on to a few more details about that, which is really I suppose the main talking point for this application. So this is one of the approved plans as part of the reserve matters submission, and this divided that Zone 6 and 7 up into smaller phases that we then linked various conditions to. Phase 1, which is to the south of the site, does include this fairly large area of open space in and around the position of the current bridge, and you can see just shown in there, it does show that current alignment of the Bridge 234. So these are just a few photos of the bridge, sort of in situ as it currently stands at the moment. This is a view looking to the northeast, looking to the southeast, so from the same direction, but a slightly oblique view. This is from the other side of the bridge looking west, and you can see particular sort of like amount of graffiti in the arches underneath the bridge and the damage to the parapet on the top. This is underneath one of the arches, arch 1, I think this one is, and you can see sort of evidence of the graffiti and the fires and sort of I guess general antisocial behaviour that does take place in and around the bridge. So in terms of condition 2, the applicant has submitted a historic building survey in relation to Bridge 2, 3, 4, and accompanied with that is a written scheme of investigation. So the two together are considered to comply with the requirements of condition 2. They've been assessed by the council's conservation officer, and they're happy with the details within that particular survey. The second half of the condition that I spoke about is effectively the compliance element of the condition, and should this application be approved, those two reports would then be required to be submitted and held on the historic environment record. So in terms of condition 5, part 8, this is what the applicants put together and come up with. So that you can see this large open space within that part of Zone 6 and Phase 1 of this particular development. You can see there's details of the various bits of play equipment that would be located within that part of the site, footpaths that allow sort of pedestrian access into the site. There has been efforts made to pay tribute and respect the position of the existing railway bridge, and that's shown with this what's been referred to as a piazza area. And I think the picture on the middle picture on the left of the screen sort of shows a 3D render of how that would look, and that particular paved area is in the exact position as the current railway bridge. And you can see that the intention is that various parts of the existing bridge have been used to make those planter features, and the positions of the current arches are marked with those cut limestone blocks, which would also be sort of salvaged from the existing bridge. Again, in terms of the play equipment, there is sort of some efforts there to theme that play equipment around, I suppose, various rail-related activities, and this sort of rope bridge that's included in there as well. The other part of the condition required details of the interpretation board, and again, that's shown to be sort of positioned close to where the existing position of the railway bridge is. And again, the intention is that the information on that interpretation board would be taken from that detailed historic building survey that's already been carried out. So in terms of the evaluation, the detail, as always, is in the report, but just to pick up on some of the key points, the development principles for Elsie Park were established through the outline consent, which was granted back in 2001. And it's an important point that there are no conditions, or there's nothing in the legal agreement attached to that outline permission that requires the railway bridge to be retained in any form. So effectively, the outline consent does grant permission for the principle of developing the whole site in terms of predominantly residential uses, but it also sort of sets out requirements for open space and some non-residential uses as well. Again, an important point is the bridge, whilst considered to be a non-designated heritage asset, and clearly there are some strong feelings about the existing bridge. In planning terms, the bridge isn't listed and it's not located within a conservation area, so it has limited or very little protection in planning terms. The third point, Elsie Park Community Trust, again, just to, I guess, remind members or inform members that the way Elsie Park works is that the land was held by a number of private individuals, which are effectively in a joint consortium. Typically when reserve matters permission is granted, the land is then transferred from the landowners across to the developers, and then on completion of the development, the legal agreement requires that the public parts of the site are then passed on to Elsie Park Community Trust. Clearly, the dwellings are sold to either private individuals or passed over to registered providers. So it's an important point that Elsie Park Community Trust would effectively be the body that would be responsible for this area and legally would be obliged to look after this area on completion of the development, and they have full support of these proposals as well. And then the final point, the historic building record and the written scheme of investigation are considered to satisfy the requirements of condition 2. The details of the pocket park and play area, I've been through those already on the visual slide and picked out the play equipment does have some railway and bridge themed equipment, some of the material salvaged from the existing bridge to mark the position or in the position of that piazza, and the signage and interpretation boards would illustrate the history of the bridge. I think it's an important point again to make. There has been a significant amount of public interest in this application, 29 representations in terms of this discharge of conditions application, and throughout both the reserve matters application and this discharge of conditions submission, there's been this ongoing campaign to save the bridge, which has over 1,000 signatories. I think an important point to make in that respect is that that's certainly commendable, and I think shows the public interest in the railway heritage and bridge. But it's an important point that the weight of public opinion isn't a material planning consideration. We have to look at the individual points that are raised through representation, not consider the volume or the weight of objection per se. In summary, the details that have been submitted are considered to be acceptable in planning terms, and therefore the recommendation is to approve the details which are reserved by condition 2 and condition 5, part 8. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Phil. And then we'll go, we have speakers now, and we will go and ask, could we have Mr. Stephen Giuliani, please? Thank you, if you'd like to come over. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Girard.
I believe right now everybody knows how important Bridge 234 is to the community of Bourne. After losing so much of our railway heritage, this little bridge, which has captured the hearts of so many, has managed against all odds to survive. It shouts above all the noise of its surrounding development and lets everyone know that Bourne wasn't built yesterday or the day before. Bourne was built by our fathers and their fathers and their fathers, because Bourne has history, and Bridge 234 reminds us that Bourne has history. To take the bridge away simply because it is the most convenient thing to do is really an act of vandalism, and we should not be supporting that. There have been other groups, including the Civic Society and the Ancient Monument Society, who have stated that the bridge should be incorporated into the new developments. From a planning perspective, what developer would not choose to incorporate this great work of engineering into their designs? With such a magnificent view, I'm sure this would be a sought after area within the Elsie Park. When I asked Bellway in February how much it would cost to leave the bridge as it is, they replied, it's not about the costing, it's about who will look after it, which really seems to be the crux of the matter. He stated that the Elsie Park Trust certainly won't, and well, I can tell you that the town of Bourne certainly would and would be happy to do so. We also know that Bridge 234 received majority of the votes as a valued heritage asset in the emerging neighbourhood plan, not by a small margin, but by a large margin compared to the other buildings on the list. The people of Bourne who have signed the petition, who have contacted their councillors, have been very clear about their wishes for the bridge to be left as a monument for the lost railway of Bourne. Bridge 234 could be a real asset to the town. On my travels to the bridge, I've noticed an increase in foot traffic. Adults have recently been taking themselves, along with groups of children, down to the bridge to learn about the railway, to sit beneath the arches and enjoy a picnic, picturing a train coming through the central arch, reminding themselves of a bygone era. They do this in a unique environment which cannot be found anywhere else within Bourne. They clap their hands to hear the reverberation within the arches. Again, something which cannot be experienced without the arches. The experience these children and adults alike take away with them is priceless. One might feel that the piazza could do the same thing, but in truth, this connection which people are feeling will be lost if it were to be removed. And that would be a real shame. Again, all in the name of convenience. We owe the community of Bourne, who are desperately trying to make themselves heard, a chance to keep their much loved heritage. Anyone who knows about our town's history know that there are many regrets with regards to buildings which have already been demolished, which is why there is a section within the emerging neighbourhood plan to prevent the destruction of our heritage from happening, to make the town a better place. Let us not add Bridge 234 to that list of regrets, especially if there is something which can be done today to preserve this little piece of splendid Victorian engineering for future generations to enjoy in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm aware that we've gone over time now, so I propose that we extend the meeting. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dilks, thank you. And could I have the next speaker, please? Oh, yes, sorry. I thought you needed to vote. All those in favour? It's majority. Councillor Cabry-Brown? Are you all right? Thank you. Could we have David Fletcher now come and speak for us? Thank you. And thank you both for waiting so long.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is David Fletcher, speaking on behalf of the applicants. I think firstly to say, and I think as mentioned at the initial committee for the Reserve Matters application, as applicants, we completely appreciate the strength of feeling around Bridge 234, and our approach from the absolute outset has been one of engagement and also seeking to do things sympathetically and come up with a vision for the bridge which we feel fully respects its history. The proposals before you today, while they are a scheme that's been led by Bellway Homes and our landscape architect, it's been a scheme design that's been very much undertaken in collaboration, not just with your own planning officers, but also with the Elsie Park Community Trust. Not wanting to repeat your planning officer, but I would specifically draw members' attention to paragraphs 5.21 to 5.24 of the committee report, which sets out the Elsie Park Community Trust comments on this application. I think in this regard, it's also very important to remember that this area is a very important area of open space within Zone 7 / Zone 6. As set out in the trust comments, their view is that Bellway Homes have gone above and beyond what they would expect a developer to do. And we feel this area of open space not only respects the history of the Bridge 234 and where possible uses elements of the bridge, but it also provides a fantastic play area for children to enjoy. The Trust in particular have been hugely supportive of our vision for this play area and how this space can be used in the future. In respect of condition 2, That was subject to detailed consultation with Heritage Lincolnshire. And again, as outlined by your officer in their report, they are very happy with the historic recording survey that's been put forward as part of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for the agent, please? Councillor Selby?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Back in March, you mentioned about engagement. My understanding, or you wanted to communicate with the public. My understanding is that this hasn't happened. You've communicated with Elsie Park Community Trust, but what communication have you actually had with the public since that meeting, please? Thank you.
In terms of communication, we undertook substantial communication certainly prior to the March Planning Committee with the general public, also with the Town Council. Since the March Committee, we have been in liaison with members of the public. I have to say it's been, I don't want to say difficult, but there's been an issue around principle, obviously, in terms of members of the public, in terms of their standpoint, in terms of wanting the building to be bridge to be retained. And it's been difficult to, I guess, get into more positive dialogue about if the bridge is not to be retained, what can we do in terms of the vision for that area? But we've certainly done our best, and it's certainly been a case of responding to members of the public when they have raised queries to us.
Thank you. Councillor Bellamy?
This one's to the speaker or to the officer. Who makes up Elsie Park Trust, please?
The officer might be best to answer that. I know I could certainly give you through the names of the people that we've been engaging, but the officer may have the official answer on that.
Yeah, again, happy to stand corrected, but my understanding is they're elected by the residents of Elsie Park, and equally I think the board is also made up of interested landowners and elected members from this district council as well.
Thank you. Councillor Judy Smith?
Yes, I did serve on the Elsie Park Board Trust at one time as a representative of South Kesteven District Council, and it's made up of members of residents of Elsie Park, 2 members from Bourne Town Council and several members from the District Council. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Any other questions for the agent? No, thank you very much. Do I have any questions for the officer? Thank you, Councillor Bellamy.
But on the first meeting, when we was talking about the bridge, was also talking about the general area around the bridge and possible loss of biodiversity and net biodiversity gain, if I can get it out, excuse me. I presume there obviously will be a net loss on this in this particular area. So have we gauged it by a net gain over a particular area or over the whole development, or is there no gain at all?
The ecology matters are quite complicated in this instance. I mean, that they're not related to this particular submission, but there is a separate condition that requires some further survey work and submission of mitigation works. I think it's, if it's helpful, I will just sort of touch on, I did some research, and this whole area was actually, intensively farmed at the grant of planning permission. So there was oilseed rape fields, in and around the site. And really, since that permission in 2001, the site's been left, and it's become, there's a lot of self-set trees, and they've reached a sort of a certain point of maturity. What we have to bear in mind when those trees are removed, again, it's similar to the consideration of the bridge. The trees aren't protected. They're not in a conservation area. and there is an overall grant of outline planning permission for the site. But we still want to mitigate and enhance biodiversity and certainly protect protected species as much as possible. So the applicant has been doing, since that grant of reserve matters permission, has been doing some significant ecology work. And I've seen an advanced copy of a ecology report, which hasn't yet been submitted, but does clearly demonstrate the work that's been done. That will require a separate application and will be assessed by the council's ecology experts. And it's accepted there will be lots of those sort of semi-mature self-set trees, clearly to facilitate this development. But where possible, protected species have been protected, and any sort of harm through development will be mitigated and enhancement provided as well. So, for example, the badger sets are within an open space, and there's no development permitted in and around those. Where there's been birds found or bats, there's likely to be a requirement for bird boxes and bat boxes as a sort of an enhancement measure for that loss of trees. So it's not necessarily relevant to this submission because it's all required under a different application, but hopefully that's some useful sort of context to see where we are in terms of ecology matters.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Dilks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to ask, I noted on paragraph 623 that the Bourne Neighbourhood Plan team is mentioned, and but they're at an early stage, which I appreciate. I just wonder though, do we know? Were they consulted in any way? Did they have a view? And also, was Bourne Town Council consulted? What is their view? Thank you.
Thank you. I can answer that one as being on Bourne Town Council. The neighbourhood plan, because it hasn't been ratified, carries no weight. So you can't go by that at the minute. Still being written. And we're getting there, but it is slow. And regards to Bourne Town Council, as it states in there, we have no issues with what has been proposed for this policy. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Selby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got some comments I wish to make in a little while during the debate, if I may. But first of all, one of my questions was the Bourne Town Council one, so thank you for that. My other question to the officers is I mean, if the bridge is retained, what would, I mean, like all things, what are the ongoing costs? Would be for this. Why would this bridge, once it's been done up, and would it invite antisocial behaviour? I don't quite understand why. And what would the pressures be on the police? I don't believe there'll be pressures there. So questions really with no answers at this moment in time. Could you just answer those, please? Thank you.
I mean, figures have been mentioned in terms of costs, but there's nothing sort of absolute in that, and I can't give a definitive answer. But again, I think the important point is that that's not a material planning consideration. In terms of the potential for antisocial behaviour, I think it's quite clear at the moment that the bridge does attract antisocial behaviour, accepting that it's, currently sort of well away from any residential development. But I think it's quite clear that at the moment there's, attracting graffiti, sort of fires under the arches and that type of thing. And so I think there are some genuine concerns there from the Elsie Park Trust in that respect.
Thank you. And what I understand is that Elsie Park would not be happy to have the costs of looking after a bridge. Thank you. And we'll go to Councillor Harish-Bisnassing next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Phil. Phil, does the bridge has to be demolished? What's the state of the bridge currently? Is it very unstable, or can it be saved in any way?
again, there's sort of various opinions that have been given on that, and we had the structural survey that accompanied the reserve maths application, and then subsequently there's been various opinions from different structural engineers. And I suspect, like anything, buildings can be retained and made safe, but again, it's not particularly relevant or material to this application, in that what could be possible. We're looking at what's in front of us for determination and whether it meets the requirements of those conditions.
Do you think if the building is not in a state of probably falling down right now in a dangerous state, do you think it could have been retained and incorporated in the design of the garden so that it will be benefit for the future of, it's a valuable, I feel it's a valuable heritage asset, and also historical value.
Can I just stop you there? It has been concluded by the Historical Society that it's not historic. I'm right in saying that, aren't I? And it's discharge of conditions that we're looking at. Thank you.
I think
more.
So, yeah. So I mean, I think it's it's fair to say it's what we would consider a non-designated heritage asset. So clearly there is some sort of historic interest in it. But I think the point about what could be done as an alternative, it's not particularly relevant in that when we're looking at planning applications of any kind, there could be dozens of alternative options that are acceptable. But that's not the test for planning application. The test is the proposal in front of us acceptable? And our view is, in this case, it's, does the submission meet the requirements of the condition? And, in our view, it very much does that. And I think sort of taking a contrary view, whilst, I'm certainly sympathetic to the position of individuals that want to save the bridge, that isn't a test of whether this application is acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Judy Stevens.
Yeah, I know you're going to jump down my throat, but I'm going to say this anyway, because I think it's really important that we think about what we do. And when we drive around the country and we look at towns and villages everywhere that look increasingly the same, and houses are built and they look increasingly like each other, and there doesn't seem to be any variation or any difference in the vernacular. And then we sit around here and we look at a building such as that, which is probably in bad repair, because at the moment we've been told this afternoon that it's in the middle of a derelict field, really, with a lot of self-set trees and not very much else. So no wonder it's subject to graffiti and antisocial behaviour. But it is a shame, isn't it, that this is irrelevant. This isn't relevant. This is irrelevant to our society. It's irrelevant to us making the decision this afternoon. And it's certainly not a material planning consideration that I'm speaking of. It's just that we are, when we make this decision, and I've got to applaud the officer and indeed the representative from Bellway Homes, because they've obviously done a considerable amount of work to try and incorporate the legacy of the bridge into the plans that they have put into place. And I'm quite sure that there is absolutely no material reason why we should object to that. But I'm going to say this because I firmly believe it, that I think it's a crying shame that we get rid of and just move over from our heritage and from all of the things that make our towns and villages interesting and part of their history and form a legacy for us going forward. I think it's a crying shame that we have to vote against it.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, please.
Yeah, I have a question, because it's regarding the antisocial behaviour aspect of the bridge. At the moment, the bridge, I've done a site visit, quite an extensive site visit actually, in spring, after our last hearing, because I thought there's so much interest, I must see what this is all about. And I was, to be honest, quite shocked at the site it was, I would have said, and I am involved in a number of conservation groups, and have done research actually, I have to say, in the Rainforest of Earthwatch, that was actually quite a remarkable site with regards to local ecology and biodiversity, as it was. However, the bridge was smack in the middle of it. So therefore, at the moment, with all of the vegetation and the growth around it, which incidentally was packed with singing birds at the time when I went, what struck me was how isolated the bridge actually was then. So if we accept the plan before us on the landscaping, whether we agree with that or not, from an ecological protection point of view, we have a very different picture around the bridge with regards to what then there would be. So picking up the point regarding the antisocial behaviour issue, and incidentally, I have to say people had actually done graffiti that was positive graffiti to try and promote the bridge and the history of the bridge actually. Some of it wasn't, but most of it was. Then it would be in a very, very different environment, and it would be much more accessible and visible. And therefore, I would suggest, therefore, the ASB risk less. But I'd appreciate the officer's response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a fundamental part of good design for public spaces in all applications is that natural surveillance. And any public area or public space, as I'm sure all members have experienced, can attract antisocial behaviour, and they do attract antisocial behaviour. But the ones that tend to succeed and don't are where they have this natural surveillance. And as you can see on the screen, that's what you've got in this case. You've got a well overlooked area that would clearly be an attractive space, and does make some sort of tribute to that bridge at the moment. And as I've said, in my view, that it is certainly unacceptable, and as Elsie Park Community Trust have said, going well above and beyond what they would normally expect for public areas that are put forward to them for transfer within Elsie Park. The fact that something different could be done, as I've already said a number of times, and the bridge could be retained, or several other options could be acceptable for that area, that isn't the test of this application. The test is, are these details in front of us satisfactory in relation to the requirements of that condition? And as I say, the officer advice is that they are.
Thank you. Councillor Selby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I did indicate that I wanted to speak, so I'll take this opportunity now, Madam Chairman, to make my comments. I'm very saddened, I have to say, with this application. I appreciate there's been a lot of work that's gone into it. First of all, we've had no site visit from this council, this committee, to view the bridge. In my view, as a qualified bricklayer, it's a work of art. It's a fabulous piece of work. It really is. Over 1,000 people have signed the petition, not a material interest, as we've been told. EN6 in our local plan. It says the council will seek to protect and enhance heritage assets and their settings in keeping with the policies of the NPPF. So we can preserve our heritage and things we value. Noticed recently in the press, Madam Chairman, about a week or so ago, there was an article referring to a community in Oxfordshire managed to save their bridge. All credit to them, I'll say. And there's been a big campaign about bridges being concreted over, and the House of Lords, peers from the House of Lords, have actually describing that as cultural vandalism. Well, I describe this, if we take down this bridge, it will be cultural vandalism, in my view. What price do we put on our culture? Is our culture worthless? I'm proud to be British. I'm proud of our railway heritage. Our cultural identity, in my view, we should be working to enhance it. As I've mentioned, in my view, it's a piece of craftsmanship. That bridge is, going back to the Victorian days, wonderful for the youngsters to see. It's a work of art. If we pull it down, we pull it down forever, and we're erasing the past. There's a phrase, seeing is believing. Well, one thing is recording something on some billboards or photographs or whatever. But another thing is actually seeing it with your own eyes. And I've been along there to see it, Madam Chairman. I took my time to go and visit it, and in my view, absolutely wonderful piece of architecture is the word. Thank you, David. I mean, I don't want to see a sign that says look what it used to be like. I would like to see a sign that says this is what it looks like now, and enhanced and made it an absolute asset for the people of Bourne. And I'm sure we know the people of Bourne, they want it. And I think there's a golden opportunity here for the people of Bourne to create something wonderful here. And when it comes to the vote, Madam Chair, I'd like my vote recording, please. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phil Dilks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I've got to say, I'm with my colleagues, Councillor Selby and Councillor Stevens on this, and I'm sure others as well. It is railway heritage, and I know we've been told it's not historic, but it is. I'm assuming it's at least Victorian, just when the railways came. It is historic, I've got to say, and we can sweep it away if we want to, but. I just regret that. I regret that we, as Councillor Selby said, I also regret that we didn't have a site visit again. As I said in the last application, I think it is an act of vandalism, I've got to say. I can understand all the questions. I understand why the developers would much rather knock it down and build houses. And yes, thank you for we're told that we're respecting its history and we're paying tribute to the bridge, but actually we're knocking it down and we're using a few of the bricks that are left over to make a flower bed, as far as I can say, and put a sign up to say there used to be a bridge here. So I regret it. As colleagues have said, I don't know what the material consideration is to turn the application down. There probably isn't one. I just go back, if I may. I don't want to tell a story because I know you said don't tell stories, but my wife's father, long dead, but it was a South Wales miner, and in the 50s he came out of the mines, thank goodness, and got a job. Bricklaying, he was a bricklayer, actually repairing railway bridges, and nothing gave him greater joy in his dotage than being driven around the valleys of South Wales and stopping at various railway bridges and him pointing out the bits that he'd worked on. He was so proud of those bridges. And, there is a huge interest in railway heritage, and I just think it's a lost opportunity. I'm not saying the whole thing could be preserved, but I just don't think we've looked carefully enough at seeing what could be preserved other than a few bricks in a flower bed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mills.
Yes, thank you. I'm just referring to the NPPF about recording a heritage asset, even a non-designated one. It does say the ability to record evidence of our past should not be a factor in deciding whether such loss should be permitted. So I think that's quite a significant consideration. When it comes to our non-designated heritage assets, they're still a significant part of our heritage. And internationally now, there is a lot of money being poured into doing landscape schemes that incorporate these old railway lines and bridges and schemes like that. I can quote you several if you're interested. And they are widely acclaimed. They bring, status to the area because it's something you're keeping. Now, when it comes to a housing estate, we've always spoken about how do you give it a sense of place? How do you say this is where you are? This is a particularly big area of the whole of Elsie Park, and to keep the bridge and would give that historic context to the place, and properly landscaped, I feel, with footpaths and things like that, linking it all through. I think people would look after it. I believe that, and it would be an area also for some bits of proper nature
rather than just a bit of grass and an odd tree. And it gives soul, doesn't it, to a housing estate? So I think there's a lot of merit in keeping something like this. I noted the applicant's agent said that they tried to engage again with people like Steve Gugliari, and they'd had a negative response because all he could talk about was keeping the bridge. But the positive side of that, and Steve said it, is that there was a group of people who would pay for it. Now, a legal deal could be done there. They would pay to keep it. So that was positive, but that wasn't mentioned. It was just the negative. But, you know, they don't want to talk about demolishing the bridge. Well, of course, they don't want to talk about that. So there are quite a lot of material considerations in this. And, you know, sometimes these schemes, well-meaning as they are a bit bland, aren't they? As Phil says, a few stones in a flower bed don't really represent the big 3-arch span and the heritage of Bourne's railways, which I think I said in a previous meeting is a big part of what Bourne is. So there is a lot to be argued about it. And I feel it probably hasn't been taken far enough by the applicants to talk to the teams who are willing to pay towards the maintenance and the upkeep of the bridge forever, and that say will be a legal agreement. And when you say we've got to look at the scheme in front of us, well, part of that is looking at demolishing the bridge, surely, because we can't do that scheme unless the bridge is demolished. So we've got to consider that element and not just you've got this to look at. So I still think there's a lot to still be considered here, and we haven't been on a site visit. This was various reasons why we didn't, but I don't see why we shouldn't. And let's look at this situation. And you know, the tribute to a bridge is just not the same as the atmosphere of a real thing. And I believe residents of a new housing estate appreciate a bit of history and realness instead of all blandness. But that's my opinion, and that's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Can I go to Martha, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate probably what I'm about to remind members of is not going to go down well, given the scope of the comments made already. But anyway, I will proceed. We are coming to the end of the determination of at least the process of these zones of LC parking. The outline permission was granted a long time ago. Reserve matters was granted in March, and we are now considering the finer details and the last details of the scheme through the condition discharge. The bridge has been afforded no protection, regardless of what members' opinion is of that point, through the outline scheme, through the Section 106 agreement. It's on private land. It could easily be shut off by the applicant and no one could have any access to it. There is varying opinions on the structural and the costs associated with that. But, and then finally, in determining where we are now, the conditions which were imposed at Reserve Matters just is they're relatively straightforward. And I have to bring you back that actually that is what your assessment today is. Have the requirements of the two conditions been met? Condition two, or one of the conditions, condition two is they require details of the level 4 historic building recording survey prior to the demolition, and they had to submit details of that. They've done a survey, that's been assessed. Your expert opinions on that assessment is yes, tick. So members the decision for members is, has condition 2 been met? Or your expert opinion is, yes, that has. So obviously members need to consider that, weigh that up. Condition 5 requires details to be submitted of the play area, including the name and equipment and interpretation boards. Has that been submitted? Yes. Again, officers have assessed what's been submitted and decided that's appropriate for the scale of the development. That is the legal test, regardless of members' opinions, which obviously have been well discussed in March and today. The legal test is, have these two conditions been met? That is what is required of you today. Nothing else, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha, for that clarification. Councillor Morgan?
Thank you. I think there's another way of looking at this. Having been on the committee in March that debated at great length the site and in particular the bridge, I'm not totally convinced that the conditions reflect the decision that was made on that day, and that's a concern to me. And it may come down to the fact that sometimes with these things, they're written down after the event. And I recall that there was a lot of discussion about the landscaping, the loss of the environmental, wildlife habitat. But there was also, there was also a significant amount of discussion regarding the protection and preservation of the bridge. I do not recall any specific vote that took place saying that bridge should be demolished. What did happen was there was an agreement that we'd bring back to the committee the decision to look at the overall landscaping. And certainly my understanding at that stage was that would include the bridge, which is obviously a significant part of the existing landscape. Not that it would be demolished. We did not vote on the demolition of the bridge. So I'd just like to make that point. I've been looking at material considerations and the value of the public evidence and the concerns there. Under the government planning guidelines for decision on applications, it says the public view can be taken into a consideration where it's relevant to planning matters. And I can quote the paragraph if you'd like, which tells us that. I think that we have got planning considerations with regards to this site, and that is the vision, actually policy to area 2, vision and spatial objectives, 2.4, which is the protection enhancement of the environment, which is on page 16 of the core strategy. We've already had quoted to us EM1. Sorry, very unhelpfully, my phone's just switched off the page, but I'd like to read you because I think it's really relevant actually. We often rely on EM1, but I think what's particularly important with the spatial and vision is that's about how you treat an area when you're developing rather than when you're not. And it says that objective 11 is to protect and enhance the high quality built and natural environment through ensuring the conservation and enhancement sensitive use and management of the district's natural, historic and cultural assets. Now, if this bridge doesn't tick every box, I don't know, to be honest, what does. Objective 12, to protect and promote the enhancement and sensitive use and management of the district's natural, historic and cultural assets and the built environment through good design and that respects important local characteristics. Does that, I'm sorry, demolishing an asset that could be retained, it'd be different if we couldn't retain it, fully understand and go with that as plan B. But what we're being told is not only could it be retained, but we have a plan to actually pay and manage it and maintain it. I can't justify us not doing it. It's the other way around. Rather than us trying to justify why we should save it, we should be justifying why we should demolish it. It does not comply. That plan does not mean, it's not just about personal opinion. This is about our core strategy, which we are supposed to work to. If we vote today and accept the demolition of that bridge, we are not complying with our own very clear core strategy. And it doesn't need the neighbourhood plan because it's actually fundamental value our council holds and has been sitting there for a very long time. That was 2010, actually. That was originally drafted. So I would like to put that if we accept this plan, we make an amendment to that plan. And that the amendment is with the retention of that bridge.
I'm sorry, can we just go to legal advice? Because I don't think we can do that at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is, we can't amend the proposal to that extent. It is a straightforward, you either approve it, refuse it. You could defer it for the applicant to take note, but you can't force another design to that extent on the applicant. That isn't what they've put forward today for you to consider.
So can you answer when the committee voted to demolish the bridge?
We'd have to, I'd obviously have to look back at the recording and the minutes of the meeting to completely be accurate, but I do remember a lengthy debate, and at the end of the day, the reserve matters were approved with condition 2 and condition 5 subsection 8 on it. And as I sort of set out, those 2 conditions are relatively straightforward. But everything that your experts are saying to you is that, and your officers, is that those 2 conditions are met. They are straightforward. The bridge has no legal protection. It's on private land. Whilst you're talking about alternatives, those alternatives are not definitive ideas. They are not before you. They have not been agreed with the landowners or the applicant. The Section 106 legal agreement is in place, which already has a scheme of management for the public open space areas. And that is the document that will be carried forward in the management of this. And the parties to that legal agreement are saying to you that actually they're more than happy, they're beside themselves with this application. You cannot speculate on what might come or what other proposals. You have to determine the application before you here and now. And the test for that is, have these 2 conditions been met? Anything else leaves the council open to risk in terms of public opinion things, but have these 2 conditions been met? Thank you.
We require a demolition, the actual act of demolishing. That it doesn't matter if it's on private land, nearly every application's on private land. We own hardly any land of our own. The actual act of demolition requires a separate order, which requires, in fact, public consultation in its own right. Did we go through that process here, or did we sweep it into the overall application and not do that specific separate work? I can't find anywhere, I wish I could, because it would clarify things, but I can't find anywhere where, and you've just stated you don't know actually at this stage, maybe we need to defer to find an answer to that question. Have we as a local authority given permission formally for that bridge to be demolished? Was it an officer decision? Was it a decision of the committee? That's all I'm asking.
Can I stop you there? I think it all goes back to the original outline plan, but Phil Moore will confer.
Just to clarify, that the fallback position here is that the bridge has no statutory protection. It's not listed, it's not in a conservation area. It's not, whilst we might describe it as having some local historic interest, it's not on a local list of non-designated heritage assets. That bridge doesn't require planning permission for the owner to demolish it. That's the fallback position. It doesn't need the council to authorise demolition.
I'm sorry, but can you not over talk when somebody else is speaking? Yeah, there's a lot of that going on this afternoon and I'm not happy with it. Thank you.
So I don't want to repeat what everything that Phil and Martha have said, but the scope of what you're being asked to determine today is the information that's been submitted to discharge these 2 conditions acceptable in planning terms. And if you were to, what you need to think very carefully about is, if you were to refuse this discharge of condition application on the grounds that it doesn't include retention of the bridge, you're then potentially looking at an appeal situation, which will be quite very difficult to defend for the reasons that I've just set out, that there is this fallback position that the bridge has no protection. It wasn't the original outline permission. There's nothing in that permission that requires retention of that bridge. Neither is there anything in the reserve matters consent that includes retention of that bridge. And whilst, you know, as Phil said, we do have sympathy with those who have sought to retain it, and there may well be other methods of retaining that. You know, planning doesn't trump everything. There might be other ways in which local groups can still manage to retain the bridge through discussions with the owners. I think you need to take those things into
very careful consideration before we make the decision.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't got any material considerations to bring forward. All I want to say is I don't believe Bridge 234 is unique. I think if you get your cars out, your bicycles, your motorbikes, whatever else you want to do, your private jets, you can go around the area and you'll find quite a few Bridge 234s because they're dotted all over the place. The other thing is Bourne has a population of just over 16,000 people, and the number of people who have signed the petition is, I think, between sort of 1,600 and 2,000, somewhere along there. So that probably says something else. I pay great tribute to Steve and all the work he's done with the petition and trying to go forward with it. But I do believe to get involved, or he needs to get a lot more people involved and supporting him. Bourne was a railway town. Behind the house where I grew up, there was a railway line. It ran from Bourne to Sleaford, and just across the Spalding Road where we lived, there was a railway bridge. But it is there no longer. In Coggles Causeway, when I biked up to the grammar school, there was a railway bridge. It is there no longer. And we had signal boxes all over the place and they've all disappeared. So, you know, unlike deep in St. James, I don't think we've got a part, well, we can't resurrect any of our signal boxes because they've long since disappeared. I was married to a train enthusiast for almost 50 years. Most of my holidays were spent, well, they called me the bag lady because I carried the bags while he went and looked at the trains, had the railway journey. I did have the journey as well, and some very nice holidays through that. But I used to finish up carrying all the luggage. So I'm not against preserving railways or anything like that. I do agree with this development because it is going to bring Bridge 234 into it. The railway line behind our house, well, where my parents live, has since been demolished. But looking to the future, it is where Bourne's new skate park is going to be built. So, you know, things carry on. What will happen in another 50, 100 years' time to the skate park? We don't know. We'll all be going up to look at Planet whatever it is with Sir Richard Branson or something like that. But anyway, that's all I want. I just wanted to make a comment that things happen and things move on.
Thank you. Could you turn your mic off?
Oh, yes.
Councillor Jackie Smith.
Yes, thank you. I hope we can save this bridge. It is important. I agree. We should look after our heritage. Over the years, I've taken part in many of these sort of discussions. And the one thing that I've found has helped the thing to get moving along is to get half a dozen people who are very enthusiastic with some good broadcasting through local papers or anything like that, and some money in a tin that sounds as if it's got quite a lot, and say, please add just how much activity something like that has brought about. And suddenly people are looking at it because they feel that it's a bit of a possibility.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. But again, we're not voting on keeping the bridge. I have to give credit for Steve for the petition, because I think without the petition, you wouldn't have got such a good play park that has been designed from Bellway. So that is a positive. But at the end of the day, we again are not voting on that. We are voting on the two conditions that are before us. And please heed the legal advice that has been given on several occasions. Thank you. Councillor Judy Stevens.
Obviously, I beg to differ with Councillor Smith, because I think actually 1,000 names and it proportionately is quite high in that community. You couldn't expect everyone to vote for, to sign a petition, but over 1,000 signatures is very good.
Yes, but not all of them came from Bourne. Remember that.
Anyway, I would say it is quite a high number, and it does represent, people in Bourne and elsewhere who do see it. And actually, heritage isn't just peculiar to the town that it's in. It's peculiar to the whole of the country. It's not just about Bourne, actually. It's about everywhere. So, just because you don't live there doesn't mean you can't be concerned with that. And of course, again, Councillor Smith highlighted how many bridges that you've lost, signal boxes, so on, how much has been lost in the past because we haven't been aware of our diminishing capital, if you like. We've got rid of things in the past, we've built in the name of progress. And the fact is that Bellway and our officers have both taken this on board to produce what they've produced now. So they acknowledge in doing that the importance of the bridge. That is inherent in what has come out this afternoon. So I applaud what they've done. I'm not detracting from that at all. But if we've got a chance that we could save the actual bridge, then I think we should take it. And I support Councillor Morgan in what she said. So I would like to suggest that we defer the decision today, because I think Bellway have gone a long way towards keeping this bridge. And I would just like to see if they would explore that a little bit more, give them some more time just to have a look at the strength of feeling really that there is in Bourne, and then bring it back to us then, and then we can make that decision. As Councillor Morgan says, we haven't actually voted on demolishing the bridge. That capital, that historic capital that we have, the vernacular, is diminishing. It's going, and that is to be treasured and looked after. And so I think we have to give it another chance. If in the end it's not possible, then we can vote for these very admirable proposals. As I say, I think a lot of work's been gone into. I would like to vote to propose that we actually defer the decision for more conversation and then bring it back to the council at that stage.
Second the proposal, Madam Chairman.
Sorry, thank you. So we have a proposal on the table. Does anybody wish to discuss that further? Then I move to a vote. Sorry, Councillor Milnes.
Is it possible within a deferment to have a site visit?
Just hang on.
Excuse me, Chair, I had a proposal already on the table which was seconded.
Who seconded
but Councillor Parish seconded it, which I thought we were debating. I'm happy to go for the deferral.
Sorry, I don't recall that you said actually I propose.
I said I am proposing that we accept this with the addition of the retention of the bridge. That's what I specifically said.
Yes.
And that's when Harish said I seconded.
Yes, but we can't accept that. It's not valid with legal.
I think we may be taking separate legal advice as well regarding this. The reason I say that is because we're being told by the officers that there's no legal protection for the bridge, but our core strategy is also relevant. Are we saying that doesn't count?
We are looking at conditions 2 and 5.8, which does not stress and doesn't say anything about the bridge going. It's in a private ownership and it isn't on this proposal. So therefore you can't propose something that isn't on here. Am I correct?
You can add conditions. You can add conditions.
It's on private land, so therefore it's not up for debate.
It's not in members' gift to determine whether it can be demolished or not.
Right.
It's on private land. It's not been given heritage status. So it's not up for consideration.
I'm happy to support the deferral, but would it require that that includes also checking what was agreed at the previous meeting?
You wanted these conditions at the previous meeting. That's why we're going through it today, because it was these conditions that were asked for. Sorry, can I have a bit of quiet in the room, please? Thank you. We asked for these conditions at the last meeting, and that is why we are discussing them today.
However many years I've been on the committee, I've not been in this position. The reason I'm challenging it, because at that meeting, my understanding was we would be considering the bridge, and it's been removed by these conditions.
We're going to go to legal again, and please listen to what she has to say, because it is valid, and I take great offence that you think she's not up to the job, which is basically what you just said. Thank you.
No, I'm saying that I would like clarification on that, to make a point of clarification there. I did not say that. What I said was our legal officer herself said that she could not, and rightly, I fully understand in the circumstances, we put on the spot, she could not recall or did not know what was previously agreed.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Notwithstanding any comments aside, I am here to assist where I can. Having had we've obviously, there's a proposition of deferral on the table, obviously just had a quick powwow with officers. Whilst members can go down that road, if they so wish, a deferral to ask the applicant to reconsider the scheme because you don't consider at present it meets conditions 2 and condition 5 is on the face of it potentially a valid thing to do. However, I fear that members from the debate that's been had is that they're looking for a scheme to come back with the bridge. The bridge has no legal protection. This has been thoroughly debated at Reserve Matters. So had the applicant wished to put forward a scheme now with a bridge in it, they had every opportunity, because you've had pretty much this exact same debate back in March. The scheme before you is the scheme the applicant wishes to pursue. There's all likelihood that it'll come back to you in exactly the same format, aka no bridge. Additionally, when we're saying we can't remember exactly what we voted on back in March, perhaps it wasn't a case of it wasn't voted on in March, but by reason of the outline not giving the bridge, having a condition requiring the retention of the bridge, or a description of development that incorporated the bridge, or any plans that kept the bridge has no protection through Reserve Matters. It has implicitly or even explicitly been stated that the bridge can be demolished by the lack of protection of conditions through the outline plan of permission and then the Reserve Matters permission. You cannot force the bridge to be retained. That is entirely in the applicant's gift. The applicant has put forward through several different stages of the process now their opinion on that. In terms of having third parties look after the bridge, the cost of that would be massive in perpetuity. Actually, when you haven't got a scheme before you signed and costed, and saying you, unfortunately, members, whilst admirable, speculating of what could come forward, that isn't necessarily how we determine planning applications. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Phil, thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, 'cause I think I understand the point Councillor Morgan's making. We did have a similar debate back in March, and I think what we sort of resolved at that time was that through the Reserve Matters consent, we couldn't protect the bridge by condition. That wasn't something that was in our gift to do. But what we did is we effectively amended the trigger point for the submission of details. So we amended the trigger point to say, prior to the bridge being demolished, we require submission of details. And what that effectively did at that time was it did defer consideration for this part of Elsie Park to see whether a proposition to preserve the bridge would come forward. And I think it's an important point to make that, as I've said already, whilst it's clear that several members and a lot of members of the public there is a will to save the bridge. In order to do that, what that requires is it requires the will of the developer and the will of Elsie Park Community Trust in order to preserve it. Because without those two parties, taking that on board, a scheme won't come forward that includes the bridge to be retained. And you could effectively have this sort of fairly perverse scenario where the bridge was retained and Elsie Park Community Trust adopted it, but they would be fully entitled to demolish it and permitted development rights. And that's what we have to sort of base our decision making on, is whilst it's clear that members and lots of people are sympathetic towards retaining the bridge, without any statutory protection, we can't give it any further protection through a reserve matters application, or in this case, a discharge of conditions application. Deferring the application merely just puts the decision off. And I feel that we would either be back here in a month's time or 2 months' time having exactly the same conversation, or as with the last application, the statutory timeframe for this application elapses on the 10th of August. And again, that's before the next committee meets, and the applicant would be fully entitled to appeal against non-determination. And I think in this case, it's not a borderline case. It's not something we could defend at appeal. I can say with some sort of degree of confidence that I think that appeal would be lost, and it would be more likely the council would incur costs through that process. So I think in summary, whilst very sympathetic to the views that have been put forward, we're just not in a position to force anyone to retain the bridge through this application or by deferring the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless I have somebody who wishes to bring something totally new, we are going around in circles, which everybody says with the Craters report we didn't want to do. So now we have a proposer, we have a seconder, and we will go to the vote. Have you something new?
Madam Chairman, I'm assuming you're referring to the proposal from the colleague
for deferral.
For the deferral. Yeah. Just also following on from what the legal said, Madam Chairman, going back to March the 17th, Bellway asked, they wanted to engage with the public. They engaged with Elsie Park Community Trust, but further consultation with the public was very, very limited, as we heard, and hence why I think this is important.
At the end of the day, Elsie Park, if the bridge was left, would be liable.
But we don't know the costs. We don't know. It's been said we don't know what the costs are going to be. So, and I don't feel that a small community trust would have the finance. And how that trust is worked, you are expecting every person that owns a property to pay money towards the keeping of that bridge. Because that costs are. It doesn't matter. It could be £5 a year. It could be £500. But you are asking those people on Elsie Park to retain it. Yeah, so we're asking.
Yeah, and you've heard, we will defer it, and we will have exactly the same arguments again and again. We will go to the vote on deferral. Thank you. So all those in favour of deferral, please put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh, I think Jack is changing an eye. If everyone that is for the proposal could please raise their hand high so that we can clarify, please.
Deferral.
6, 7.
7 for deferral. Those against? 6. So we'll go for deferral. Thank you. And we will have a 10-minute break to let us all cool down a bit. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I've got to go. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Please, thank you for the last item, which was item 4, which is now item 7, which is S20 1759. Sorry, could you, thank you. And we have Ellie Seiler to present. This is her first time, so please be gentle with her. It is a hot day. It's S20 1759. It's agenda item 4. No, because this is Carlby, where we deferred it and we had the designer look at it. Okay. Right, we're up and ready, so thank you when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, before I forget, it's a hot day. This has been pre-heard, so there are 3 people who cannot speak or vote on it, and that is John Cottier, Councillor Judy Stevens and Penny Robbins. Thank you. And I don't think Charmaine, you were here for that one, were you? Yeah, thank you. So those people cannot take a vote or speak in the debate. Thank you. Sorry, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name's Ellie Siller. I'm one of the new senior planning officers. So this proposal, as mentioned, came to committee back in March. So it's been part heard. It's within Carlby and it's for a proposed new dwelling. So the key issues here with the principle of development, the design and character, amenity and drainage. This is an aerial view of the site. As you can see just in red here, that's the site and it's within the main part of the village in the built up area. That's a closer up view. You can see there's dwellings either side and to the rear. This is the site location plan. The smaller part in blue just outlines where there is a proposed shared access, and that's as per the previous application. So this is a photo of the dwelling to the south, number 20. As you can see, it's quite a big modern dwelling. This is one of the properties opposite the site, again, modern in its design. And same again, number 15, also opposite. This is number 24, which lies to the north. It's a traditional cottage. And this was what the parish were originally concerned about, that the proposal would have a negative impact on its character, mainly due to the height of the proposed dwelling. So the proposal has been revised to reduce its scale. This is a photo of the site as it is. It's undeveloped apart from the shed, which was ancillary to number 24. And that's another picture of the site from the front. That's from High Street. And this is a photo of the bungalow that lies to the rear of the site. That's just a site plan of as it is existing. So you can see the relationship with number 24, that's the cottage. Now, these are the previously proposed elevations, quite a large detached dwelling. You can see the 2-story height. This north elevation here is what would have been facing the cottage. So full 2-story, quite a long depth. And that's what the main concern was from the parish. So on to the proposed elevations now. This is the reduced scale scheme. You can see here on the side that would be adjacent to the cottage, they've reduced it down to a 1.5-story scale. And they have this projecting gable here to the front. So this is just to compare the two site plans previously. So it's still got the L shape that was previously proposed. But what they've done is they've rotated it 180 degrees so that instead of that long depth aside the cottage, you've now got just this gable end that would be 1.5-story in height. So a quick summary of the changes that have been made. You've got the rotation 180 degrees. The maximum ridge height has been reduced from 7.3 metres to 6.6. The eaves have been reduced from 5.05 to 3.8. That's on the north elevation, which would be adjacent to the cottage, and the 3.8 metres actually matches the eaves height of the cottage. The depth to the north elevation has been reduced from 10.85 to 6.29 metres. There's no first floor windows anymore to the north elevation, so no issues with overlooking. Just a note on that, there are 2 windows to the south elevation, but these would be obscure glaze as they would serve a bathroom and an ensuite. And then finally, a stone boundary wall has been added to the front boundary, which would make use of salvage stone from the site to be in keeping with the boundary treatment to the adjacent cottage. Just before I go through the evaluation, there has been contact from the neighbour today, this afternoon, just to make a point that on the additional items, there's a point made that there's a legal agreement already in place about joining drainage to number 24. He just wants to point out that that agreement isn't actually already in place yet, but notwithstanding that, it is a separate legal matter, so not something to be considered in this decision. So just to conclude then, the principle of the dwelling on the site is acceptable as infill. It's in accordance with SP3 of the local plan. The revised design is a significant improvement on the previous design in terms of the scale. The parish have confirmed that all their previous concerns have been addressed through this revised design, so there's no objection. And there's no adverse impact on residential amenity of the surrounding neighbouring properties. So to conclude, it's considered that the proposal is in accordance with the local plan and the MPPF, and the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. You did very well for your first presentation. Do I have any questions, please? Councillor Penny-Mills.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ellie. It is a significant improvement, no doubt. And I'd like you to just confirm, I think I heard you say that the eaves height of the end of the proposal to the old cottage is the same, which is significant, because I was going to ask you if you had a drawing compared with the two, because there is a slight land level difference as well, and the cottage is slightly lower. And I just wondered if you had a drawing to show us the comparison there. Because I think that was one of the most important concerns that we had from the site visit. Yes, I think now you've got the graduation of the height and the change in the mass, so it's a lot better. I always think these, and I know it was in the previous proposals, that the projecting gables can be quite prominent in the street scene, and that's another point. And I'm very much in favour of the stone wall frontage, because that was something we asked for on the site visit. Could that be included? So that's another plus. Nice to have pluses, isn't it? The only thing, I would say that in a village, to have no garaging and 2 car parking spaces is, for a 4-bedroomed house, is probably not really adequate, because nearly everybody has a car to drive around from a village, and I wondered what comments we might get about that. But overall, yes, it's a significant improvement. But if you could just answer me 2 of those points that I've dragged up, that would be very nice. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you, Councillor Milnes. So just to pick up on the street scene elevations that you were wanting, we haven't got that to hand. We do have the levels. We do have the levels noted on the site plan, but just for the proposed dwelling. So it's acknowledged that there is a slight increase in level on the site, but there is a condition within the landscaping condition. It's condition 6, which is in the report, and that requires them to submit the levels. So in that condition, we can get them to submit the levels of the adjacent cottage as well, just to ensure that it's not significantly higher, which from the site photos and things, it just, so even if it was slightly higher than the cottage, it wouldn't be significantly. Does that answer the question for that one?
Yes, thank you. That answers the questions on the eaves height there. It might just affect it, but yes, significantly better. And the question about garaging and car parking, I suppose it's a fairly general question, really, that we seem to be accepting now applications with no garaging and limited car parking in the villages for a 4-bedroomed house. So I don't know what comments you might make on that.
So with garages, LCC highways don't include garages as a parking space. So if that had been on there, they wouldn't have included that as parking facilities anyway, because these days a lot of people don't put their cars in garages. There are 2 spaces shown on the plan. And yes, there is turning space, but if needed, there would be space on the driveway for another one. It may make it slightly more awkward in terms of manoeuvring, but there are 2 spaces, and highways were reconsulted on the revised plan and they haven't come back with any comments further to make.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I visited the site and I had the benefit of a site visit, I've got to say, and we could see prior to March that it was, frankly, it was a quart in a pint pot, and it was out of keeping, you know, for that area. And I'm pleased actually that we deferred it. And I think we've got some improvements, and I note and welcome the comments from the parish council saying, you know, that everything has been taken on board. So thank you to the planning team and the applicant for coming, for sort of coming up with those changes to sort of improve the impact, particularly on the neighbouring properties and the visual impact overall of the application. So I think that, you know, that illustrates, it's a good example of the use of deferral by this committee. And on that basis, I would be happy to propose approval for the application.
Thank you. Councillor Bishnessing.
I will gladly support that, second that.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers in the debate or questions to the officer? No, then we can go to the vote. All those in favour, please. Yeah. 8 in favour, those against? None, and any abstentions? None. So that is carried. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank you all for your time, especially the officers and the democratic services for all of your time, because it's been very hot and long. And thank you very much, and take care. I close the meeting at 5:35. Thank you.